Hello there, everybody. Thank you for having me today, Deborah, and a big shout out to Sue and Vanessa for the amazing work they're doing behind the scenes to make this all possible. I am Nicky McGrath, and I'm thrilled to be with you today to share a bit about who I am, what I do, and my thoughts on teaching voice and all of that good stuff. So I'll bounce between sharing my screen and not as we go through some stuff together today. Here's the game plan. Let's start there. So today I'll be covering a bit about my story, and for those of you who've worked with me before or know me, this actually might be something new. This is part of my story that I haven't talked too widely about, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that today and seeing where that takes us. I'll be talking about my teaching philosophy as an evidence based vocal pedagogue and someone who definitely specializes in contemporary voice stylings, including musical theatre, and a little bit about the last 2 years and what that's looked like and how I've been working with people. So let's stop sharing. There we go. So when people work with me, they're not rocking up for a voice lesson and then left out to sea until the next week or the next time we work together. And they're not left scratching their heads wondering what the hey a diaphragm is and do you even know about it? Do you even need to know about it, rather? And we absolutely do not try to make a square peg fit into a round hole. Instead, what we do is we celebrate progress. We celebrate making steps towards developing the voice practice we love over the myth of perfection. We celebrate the building of awareness, and we celebrate every single voice and all that it has to offer our world. And we do a lot of myth busting too. It's one of my favorite things. Um, Other things that I really prioritize that I want to share straight off the mark is that value neutral language needs needs to become how we support ourselves and each other in voice practice. Prioritizing that over saying something was good or something was bad. Instead, we talk about what felt consistent or what felt different to the last time around, what felt like maybe harder work than it needed to, maybe what felt really easy breezy. Those sorts of things. The list really, really goes on. And I love working in a way that's Socratic, using guided discovery and conversation and experimentation and loads of play. Oh my goodness. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of your questions later on. So my story, like many others, begins when I was a small child. I love to sing. I've been singing since I was a tiny tot. Manhattan Transfer were a favorite of mine when I was a toddler, and I used to scout along with them in my little toddler babble. And I've been training as a musician since I was almost 7 years old. I trained on a multitude of instruments, and in high school, I was taking classical voice lessons and had ambitions of being an opera singer. When I finished high school, I thought all my dreams came true because I started voice lessons with a professional opera and musical theatre performer who had worldwide recognition. And I didn't even approach him. It was teed up through a mentor of mine, and it just seemed like all my dreams were coming true working with this person. And we went on for a little while. And then I remember one day I walked into my voice lesson. I'd had my heart broken for the very first time. I was, 17 and young and confused and trying to find my feet in the world. And I sang, and I remember my teacher looked at me and he said, "Nicky, I don't think I see a star quality in you. I don't think performing's for you. Maybe you'd be better suited to an admin job." And I didn't know how to advocate for myself at that time. I've learned a lot since. But I got into my car, got on the phone to my parents, and I said, I think I'm going to go and enroll in business school. And I did. And if you've met me, It's not really. Look, I've had a great successful career in the business world, but it's not really my primary vibe. I'm just gonna say that. So I did a business degree for a little while, and then I switched into something a little bit more creative. And that led me down the path of having a really vibrant, exciting corporate career. I was managing large scale public events in the video game industry. I went on to be a business development manager and a business coach. I had a great career. And I reached a point in my career and in my life where I'd been through some stuff, as you do. And that whole time, had kept singing, I'd kept playing music, I'd kept putting little videos on YouTube and just playing music to myself in my bedroom. And I really missed singing with other people. I'd grown up in lots of choirs and touring internationally with different ensembles in high school, and it had been a real missing link in my life. And that's when barbershop came into my world. Oh my gosh, barbershop, how I love you. And I remember coming off the stage at my first convention, sitting around a table, having some food with my friends and the director, and saying, I need to be doing music full time. And it was the first time I'd uttered those words in probably 10 years. Fast forward 6 months, and I was auditioning to study at the conservatorium that I dreamed of as a little girl. But this time around, it was a master's specializing in vocal pedagogy. Because y'all, much as I was doing great things with singing, like singing was going really well for me, I felt really connected with my voice. I was also so confused. Like, what's a diaphragm? What is registration? What are all of these words? What is space? Like, how do I make space? Do I need to do that? So that's why I went and studied vocal pedagogy, because I wanted answers. And I got to my first day of class and they were like, yeah, so your first assignment's coming up and we'll be assessing your teaching. And I was like, oh, I guess I better start teaching then, hey? And so I did. And I was already informally doing that with my peers in barbershop chorus and stuff. But then I started my business as a musician full time. I went all in. And all of that has kind of led to now and the teaching philosophy that I've developed, which I'm really excited to share with you. So let me share my screen again and share how that has evolved. Here we go. So today, the way that I help singers is evidence-based. It is human-friendly, and it is absolutely singer-led. And I do all this so that you can truly understand and love your voice and feel like a rock star when you get on stage, because that is the greatest feeling, I think. And I'm really looking forward to all of us experiencing that again sometime soon. But what does all of that mean? All of these funny words? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, according to Kari Reagan, one of my favorite pedagogues and researchers, evidence-based pedagogy is the integration of voice expertise and experience with student goals and perspectives and relevant research into voice science and production to effectively evaluate and identify technical inefficiencies to guide students toward vocally healthy and efficient, stylistically accurate, and artistic performances. So it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's taking practices from years gone by, understanding anatomically, physiologically, scientifically how they work so that we can distill cause from effect in deciding in exploring the efficacy of exercises to best support you as a singer. Okay, so evidence-based pedagogy, I admit, can be a little scary because it's super unfamiliar, and that can actually create, I think, some barriers to vocal pedagogy. Goodness knows, it has made me a much stronger teacher and absolutely a stronger and more empowered singer. And I did my master's degree in this, I think, so that you don't have to. Unless that's your jam, in which case, like, super cool, let's talk. I love that. But, you know, we want things to be human friendly. And that's one of my superpowers. I can take complex concepts from voice science and translate them into singer speak, human speak, so that it can support you and your learning styles as a singer. So I'd like to explore a little bit of that together. I want you to grab your hands and put them in a little V in front of you. Fabulous. And now I want you to breathe in and out. Awesome. That's what your vocal folds are doing right now. This. What about if we breathe in, hold your breath, breathe out. Awesome. I love that for you. That was what your vocal folds were doing then too. Alternatively, I could talk about the adduction of the vocal folds supported by the lateral cricoarytenoid and interorytenoids, which are some muscles, intrinsic muscles. We could talk about the oscillations of the vocal folds and the Bernoulli effect. We could talk about the antagonistic relationship between the thyroarytenoid and the cricothyroid. But I'm going to guess that for most of you, that's not really helpful in terms of how we sing. So let's continue on with this hand moving exercise together. So singing is largely a coordination of two things. It's the vocal folds and breath. So when breath meets our vocal folds and they come together in a vibrationary pattern like this, do this with your hands. Hum with me. That's what your vocal folds are doing, my friend. They're actually more like the size of your thumbnail. They're really, really small, but this is supporting us in mapping our voice and what it's actually doing. Love it. So let me go back to sharing my screen a little more with you. And here you can see the comparison. We go from the big fancy words and the complex kind of understanding of it into something that's a little bit more useful that we can do something with. Other things that come into evidence-based pedagogy include body mapping. So this is part of body mapping. It's building a realistic connection with our anatomy, how our body functions. For example, we're breathing air into our lungs, not our stomach, and definitely not our diaphragm, which is a muscle. It means that we're playing with voice function exercises, distilling cause from effect. So that could mean that when we hear breathy singing, it might not actually be caused by too much breath. There could be some other things at play. It also means that intonation, for example, is not because your ears can't hear pitch accurately. It's typically something to do with our vocal production. In evidence-based pedagogy, we also have lots of fun playing with wild sounds. These are called primal sounds, and we now have understanding about how these work with us neurologically and what messages that can send to the vocal mechanism itself. We play around with alignment and focusing on functional alignment. Sure, we have an ideal of how we want our bodies to be for singing, but we also have unique anatomy as well, different curvatures of our spine, and finding things that work for you as a singer to get comfortable in your own voice, comfortable in your own body. I also feel strongly about breathing for the style and the task at hand. So much of our voice education comes from the classical or Western art music world. And there's a real inverse relationship between the education that's available and then the kind of music that's consumed. And so as we start to explore more in voice science about what that looks like for contemporary music styles, it means that our understanding shifts, particularly around things like breath. You know, when we are playing with something like a contemporary vocal sound, like an extreme vocal effect, like maybe belting, we don't actually want a lot of breath. There are actually some really different strategies that we get to use. A lot of my practice as well comes from learnings through vocology or working with speech and language pathologists. So I really love using accent method breathing, which we've got that fricative word coming up again, friends, uses voiced and unvoiced fricatives. We also then integrate things like motor learning, using gesture to help us to coordinate the actions that we want from our vocal folds, and using resonance strategies for different styles. So that could mean moving away from using subjective terms for instruction, like adding space, singing into a mask, because these can mean different things for different people, and mismap the instrument. Cool. And then we move into, oh, am I still showing my screen? I am. Cool. I'll go back from that then. And then the third pillar in my teaching philosophy was about being human friendly. Um, no, it was singer led, not human friendly. Singer led means that you're the expert on your instrument and on you and on your artistry. I might be an expert on the voice, and that includes like singing and voice function, but I am merely here to be a guide and facilitator for your learning. We collaborate to create a game plan that's going to directly support your own singing goals so that you can be really empowered in your voice practice and feel like you are in the driver's seat. You have the GPS set for what it is that you're working toward in your own practice, rather than being influenced by, say, my biases or my aesthetic preferences. In my teaching as well, we focus a lot on asking how that feels for you. And I find this really important because I might hear something and I might see something, but that can actually mismap, for want of a better word, with how you feel about your instrument. I had an experience just the other day working with a singer, and things sounded so well coordinated. It was like great things were happening. And I was like, cool, how did that feel for you? And they were like, felt really, just didn't feel good. It felt hard. And I was like, okay, this is really good feedback to have. And that allowed us to be able to work toward something that was going to be helpful for them rather than what I thought they needed. Ultimately, singing is hard. We have a really complicated instrument. We picked a tough one, my friends. But the aim and what you deserve is for it to feel deceptively easy. I know so much of what I've shared today is pretty technical or kind of getting on the surface of things that are really technical. And that I think that technique is really important because it creates room for us to fully express ourselves as artists and fully realize our artistry. It's imperative that we give ourselves that room and space to explore technique, as well as time for performance, as well as time for art. And so I'd like to share with you one of my favorite things that I was taught by a voice teacher. And it's that if you're listening and I am listening, then who is singing? If you're listening and I'm listening, who is singing? Oh, I cried the first time I heard that.
You are amazing, Nikki. Do you think we could take maybe one or two questions?
Oh, sure.
Um,
Sorry. I didn't even realize the time. Let's
that's
do that.
quite all right. Anne has asked the best way to handle breathing at the end of a song when you're holding a note, doing choreography, and it seems like we always run out of breath.
Okay. And such a good question. Bit of a can of worms in the voice world, but I love it. I think in barbershop and lots of contemporary styles of singing, one of the things that I see often is over breathing. So, what happens when we take a big breath? And you can do this with me. Take a big breath and hold it. Oh my gosh, it's hard work. The lungs are elastic. They want to recoil back down and get rid of that breath. And so in our training for our style, we in a chorus, we have the privilege of being able to breathe when we need to. Take the time to breathe when you need to. I think we also get to explore different ways of breathing. A low abdominal breath or a splat breath or a whatever you want to call it breath isn't always going to be the most helpful thing to us in our style. It can also then lead to things like singing in a vocal register that is not as efficient as what it could be. So these things are really, really interwoven. So I could keep going on this question,
Well,
but
there is another one from
sure.
Amy. I
Hmm.
love that part of your philosophy with individuals is student led and that you, as a teacher, are facilitator. Do you have suggestions for what directors and musical leaders who want to try a bit less of the do what I say versus let's try with their ensembles?
Oh, I really love this. Yeah. I wonder, and I'm putting my coach hat on because I'm also trained as an NLP practitioner. I wonder what would happen if our goals as an ensemble were member driven rather than music team or director led. I wonder what would happen if we asked individuals what their personal goals are as singers and as really critical contributors to the ensemble, because it's each single person who gets to create that. And I think when we have, as organizations, as chapters, as choruses, when we have that really deep understanding of the individual, and the individual is also really intrinsically connected with their own goals, be them singing goals, performance goals, whatever it might be, it then gets to create a greater sense of purpose and more clarity in the direction of the ensemble. Hmm.
Great answer. Doug asks, if you are listening and I am listening, then who is singing? I understand that if you are a soloist slash lead, what if you are singing a harmony part?
Oh, for sure. I think in barbershop, it is a really technical art form. And so we are using our ears a lot. Remember, our ears lie to us while we're singing. Predominantly, we hear our own voice through bone conduction. So that means internally rather than air conduction, the world around us. So it's not actually a good source of truth to listen to ourselves while we're singing. We also get to give ourselves that time to listen. And I teach a lot about like recording ourselves, listening back objectively, being supportive of what we're hearing rather than judgy about our singing practice. Um, Testing out a theory, going back to foundational skills, seeing what our progress is and going back. Give yourself that time to be technical, but you must give yourself time to be artistic and creative and just sing, because that's what we do when we go on stage. People don't want to see our cogs turning, they want to see art.
And also, would you describe changing volume without creating pressure explosion? Could you kind of talk that through a little bit? Changing
Changing
volume without
volume without
creating
creating
pressure.
pressure explosion. Yeah. Yep. Uh, hmm. I think this is a really interesting question, and also the way I would approach it is really subjective. So, something to consider is resonance. Resonance is a funny word. It's a funny concept, and I think often misunderstood. Resonant singing can be heard on musical theatre stages and pop stages, as well as classical music stages. And essentially, when we sing with different kinds of resonances, we can get volume for free with less work. So we're finding ways to optimally use the instrument. We're not trying to project our sound to the wall or to the room or to the crowd. Instead, we're focusing on the resonator of our instrument, which is our vocal tract. It's the oropharynx, the space in our mouth, and the laryngopharynx, just here in the throat, if you like. Tiny little bit in the nasopharynx, the nasal cavities, a bit up for debate, more research needed. But this is where the work happens. We get the air from our lungs meeting our vocal folds, doing their vibrating, and then that gets shaped in our vocal tract. So there are some things going on with the vocal folds, there are some things we can play around with breath, and there are things that happen in the vocal tract. But consider this, when someone is belting a really high energy, high intensity type of singing, they're using a small amount of breath, small, tiny, and they've got firm vocal fold closure, but it feels easy. Belting should feel like an effort level of like, I don't know, 4 out of 10. That's when we know that we're belting healthily. And that's some energetic singing. That's a lot. That's a lot of noise.
Thank you, Nikki. And even though we're over time, I think everybody would want to hear the answer to this. Does the mentor who gave you that unfortunate advice know that your life direction has changed to continue in music and how well respected you are in this genre.
Oh, that, thank you. That's a really kind comment and question. I really appreciate that. You know, if I was still in my in Brisbane, they might. Uh, I don't know, and I have nothing but gratitude for my experience and my story. I am thankful that I had the path that I had and the experiences that I had. I think it's given me the skills to be an empowered business person as well as a really compassionate and well-educated teacher. So I wouldn't change it even though it hurt a bit at the time. Hmm. Thank you. Oh, you're all so lovely.